Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Yes.
So to start off, you must have all seen the event poster, which had a minivet on it. So the initial idea was to talk about warblers, minivets, and flycatchers. And then as I thought more about it and started preparing with warblers, I realized that warblers by themselves will take up an entire session comfortably. And I think is one of the most misunderstood groups. Minivets, I think many of you will already have a hang of. And flycatchers, of course, deserve their own session. So we'll continue this, hopefully with flycatchers the next time. But we'll start off with warblers here. So I want this to be as interactive as possible. I know that people cannot speak at all times. Somebody just drew a line on the screen. Can we do something about that? Maybe I'll just need to disable annotation. Huh. Let me see if that line remains and everything. Possible to remove that line, whoever put it there, or maybe I need to share my screen again. 1 second. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. So I want this to be as interactive as possible. So the best thing to do is to type an answer in the chat, ask a question, and I'll be looking at the chat as well as much as possible. And later on, if anybody wants to unmute, we can unmute and then have a conversation. Right. So I'll start off with warblers of the Himalaya. And before that, I'd like to welcome our friends from Nepal and Bhutan here. It's wonderful that we're doing this Himalayan bird count together. And for everybody else who's joining from outside the Himalaya, there's endemic bird day as well. But there are very few endemic warblers that we have. So, okay. So start off with some important features of warblers. And many of you would have become aware that perhaps the most important feature is wing buzz. So the first thing you look at with the Phylloscopus warblers. So this presentation will be restricted to Phylloscopus warblers, which are leaf warblers. So leaf warblers, the most important thing to look at are wing buzz. Leaf warblers are typically seen up in the canopy, but sometimes even lower down. And with binoculars, you cannot see much, but you can often get a look at whether they have wing bars or not. And with a photo with the camera, you can, most photos will show this one feature at least about whether they have wing bars or not. So just with wing bars, you can tell a lot. But first, for those who don't have much experience with warblers, I'll point out what these wing bars are. So here you see this photo of a Himalayan warbler. We'll get to what this warbler is. You can all guess in comments if you like. So the wing bars are these two or one line that you'll often see on the side of the bird, right, on the wings. And they look like one or two bars. So this is a feature that is very visible. So if a warbler has wing bars, you'll often see those wing bars. If it doesn't have wing bars, you won't see those wing bars. So they broadly divide into two groups, leaf warblers. You have a set of warblers that do not have wing bars. This is Tickel's leaf warbler, sulfur-bellied warbler, Titler's leaf warbler. So I'm mostly mentioning Himalayan warblers. Gray-hooded warbler, chiffchaff, dusky warbler, smoky warbler, and sometimes greenish warbler can lack a wing bar. So remember this. Warblers that have wing bars, you have greenish warbler, there's Humes, lemon-rumped, buff-barred, ashy-throated, blight-sleeve, western crown, several with wing bars. So this is a very obvious thing. Like wing bars are always used to identify them. But as you found out, wing bars alone are not so useful to ID warblers. So we'll go to the next important ID feature, which is the crown stripe. So what is a crown stripe here? It is sometimes very prominent, sometimes slightly indistinct line that is there on the crown of a leaf warbler. So everybody can see the crown stripe here, right? So this warbler clearly has wing bars and a crown stripe, the warbler that is there in the picture. And crown stripe here is in red. And for those who may be colorblind, it hopefully shows up as something other than black. There is some contrast. Um, and all the ones that are in this color in under both columns, wing bar absent and wing bar present, are the ones that have a crown stripe. So among the ones that don't have a wing bar, gray-hooded is the only one that has a crown stripe. On the other side, with the wing bar present, we have several species that have crown stripes. Humes, lemon drum, buff-barred, ashy-throated, blight-sleeve, western crown, chestnut crown, whistlers. So if it has wing bars and there's absolutely no sign of a crown stripe, even an indistinct crown stripe, we are down to greenish and large-bill leaf warbler in the Himalaya. There'll be a lot of guessing. So this is just an initial an introduction. The next important feature, a very important feature, are these white tertial edges. What is a tertial edge? You might have heard this term being used quite often. So it's it's this region, the edge of the tertials, which are these feathers that come just these feathers here. And you'll see that they have these white edges. Is that visible to everybody here? This is something that you can see in field also. It's quite prominent, and in photos you will often find that this shows up. Does it have these white tertial edges or not? That's a really important feature. So the three very important features here are tertial edges, crown stripe, and wing bars. Now, using these three features, let's see how we can identify some Himalayan warblers. So we'll start off with a really easy one. Identify this species. Take a look at what's written on the left here. White tertial edges, the species that have that are in bold and in italics. The species that have a crown stripe are in red or this different color. Huh. And I've written which ones have wing bar absent and present. So quickly in comments, let me know which one this is. Which wobbler this is. Right. So does it have a crown stripe or does it not have a crown stripe? It has a crown stripe. Can you see this pale?
One, yes.
Yeah. Can you see this pale line on the crown? That it has a crown stripe. Does it have a wing bar or not? Doesn't have a wing bar. So very clearly, this falls into the wing bar absent group. And the only one that has a crown stripe among those is gray-hooded warbler. So this is a gray-hooded warbler. I saw that somebody had also guessed sulfur-bellied warbler, which also has yellow. But remember that sulfur-bellied warbler does not have a crown stripe. So the thing about leaf warblers, unlike pipits, unlike larks, unlike many other groups, bush warblers, these acrocephalus and iduna warblers, booted, sykes, blight-street warbler, unlike all of those, these warblers have clear rules. There are very clear rules to be able to identify them. So it becomes much easier. And we're not even going to get into their calls in this session. We're just going to go by appearance. And that's what actually makes them easier than any other group, in my opinion. That they have very clear rules for ID, leaf warblers. So here we have we have got our ID here as gray-hooded by eliminating other possibilities and by looking at the only one that fits this combination of features. One more thing you must have noticed is all the warblers with white tertial edges also have a crown stripe, right? So fine. So we'll go to the next step. You would have noticed that I removed a few warblers from this list, which are actually quite distinctive and easy to identify, like chestnut crown warbler and whistler's warbler. These are very distinctive in their appearance and they can be treated separately. So I'm looking at the ones that have some possibility of confusion. Next one. Okay, before that, gray-hooded is a very widespread warbler. It's there all across the Himalaya, all the regions that are there in today's webinar, and comes little bit down into the plains in winter, but not into the peninsula. So grey-hooded is a very abundant warbler in the Himalaya. Now a more complicated one. Identify this warbler. So comments, please. Yeah, lots of guesses coming in.
Lot of people on the YouTube are also commenting. They are
Okay, can you
saying,
tell what the main thing, the main answer they're commenting?
I think some of them have said Humes. One of them have said green crown,
Okay, there is some guesses
greenish.
that are large build. There are some guesses that are greenish. Okay, right. Okay, so majority are saying Humes. Some are saying large build. Some are saying greenish. Let's see what the rules tell us. So what can you see in this wobbler? So I'll point out. It clearly has wing bars. So we go to the wing bar present group, right? What other feature do we see clearly over here? It's difficult to see whether this one has a crown stripe or not, although it has a slightly pale part there, but it's a little hard to say. So we won't even look at crown stripe in this photo, but we look at clear, prominent white tertial edges. So that leads us to just four species: Hume's, lemon drum, buff-barred, and ashy-throated. Remember that the presence of these white, prominent white tertial edges immediately rules out species like greenish large-billed, and the presence of wing bars rules out a whole set of other species. So we have come down to these four possibilities. Among these four possibilities, these are the four. How do we identify these four? So can people quickly guess which ones are clockwise top to bottom? Which ones are these? One of them you've already guessed. I haven't said which one it is, but the majority guessed Hume's. The second, then go clockwise, the bottom left, and the next one. Quickly, second one, third one, and fourth one. Okay, okay, fine. Many guesses. Right. So let's see. All of these, you can again immediately rule out there's no greenish involved. So greenish, there's a tendency to call a lot of warblers greenish. But the moment you see these white tertial edges, the moment you see a crown stripe, greenish is completely out of the picture. And actually, these four warblers on the screen are far more common than greenish warbler across most of the year in the Himalaya. Greenish warbler is a localized breeder and it's there during passage. But it is not actually uh, the most abundant Himalayan warbler. We'll get to that. Most people guess this right. The first one is indeed Hume's. Hume's is the plainest of these warblers that have these tertial edges. One warbler I haven't included here is yellow-browed warbler. Yellow-browed warbler can be very similar to Hume's, but will have a pale bill and pale legs typically. Best way to tell it apart is by the call. But for now, among the ones that are relevant now, we have Humes. Lemon rummed, as somebody said, it has a prominent crown stripe. It has a much more prominent crown stripe than most other warblers with white tertial edges. It also has this interesting shaped eye stripe. So the eye stripe you can see kind of becomes like a hockey stick, as somebody mentioned. if that looks like a hockey stick, but it has a bit of a curve, the eye stripe. This hooked eye stripe, that's usually a reliable feature for lemon rump. But where does lemon rump get its name from? That's from the rump, and lemon rump has the most extensive yellow rump of all these warblers. You can see that ashy-throated over here, the bottom right, also has a bit of a yellow rump, but not as extensive as lemon rump. But because this one also has, that's not the only feature to identify lemon rump, because ashy-throated can also have that. Ashy-throated is easy to identify from all of these because it has a yellow belly and an ashy throat and head. So it's the only one of that group that has that. But over here, I would say beware of chestnut crown warbler. Make sure you get a look at the crown, because otherwise chestnut crown warbler can look quite similar to ashy-throated, except for the chestnut crown. But of course, if you see the chestnut crown, that becomes very clear. And what about buffbird? So buffbird has a yellowish wing bar, a buff-colored wing bar, but as you can see, ashy-throated and lemon-rumped can also show wing bars that are of a similar color. So I would suggest that do not use a buff-colored bar alone to ID this. Use the rules that are given on the side, and the fact that it has a slightly grayish crown. You see this gray contrast. You also will see that it often shows whitish outer tail feathers. So buffbird has the plainest face among all of these. There's very little contrast. It's a gray head, and it has white outer tail feathers. So this is buffbird at the bottom left, but we'll get to other ways to identify some of these as well. Next step. So humes, actually, the other three are there in the Himalaya year round, but humes typically winters in the peninsula, winters in lower altitude. Apologies to people in Nepal and Bhutan. This map doesn't have the distributions in Nepal and Bhutan because it was part of State of India's birds. But I'm showing this just because it has the summer, passage, and winter distributions. So you can see that in passage and in summer, it reaches some part of the Himalayas, humes. Okay, identify this one. Follow the rules. Okay. Somebody has guessed ashy. Keep guessing. Remember the rules. I'll go one step back just to show you these four. That one has tertial edges, like whitish or some different colored tertial edges. So it rules out all of the others. So we're down to this group: humes, lemon-rumped, buff-barred, and ashy-throated. Out of these, which one could it be? It doesn't have a hooked eye stripe. It doesn't have a very prominent crown stripe on the crown. So we are ruling out lemon-rumped at the start. We're down to the other three. Fine, almost everybody has guessed buff-barred, which it
Yes.
is. Yes, so
Even on the
buff-barred because
YouTube,
again, a
even on the
relatively plain
YouTube, we are
face.
getting answers of buffbird.
So majority have guessed buffbird. But there is another reason for buffbird aside from the features in play. We know how to rule out over here lemon rump. Uh, we can rule out ashy throated because the throat is not gray with contrasting with the yellow belly. So that is out. But there's another reason. Buffbird absolutely loves rhododendron, and it tends to feed a lot on rhododendron, on nectar, and you'll often see buffbird, especially in the flowering season in spring, with nectar, with the pollen on its face. Even here, you can see some whitish pollen. on its throat, but often you see pollen around, and they're really partial to rhododendron. So this is going to be all across the Himalaya, Nepal, Bhutan, in like Sikkim, the Western Himalayas with a lower diversity of rhododendron, but you still see a lot of rhododendron. You're often going to find buffbard feeding on rhododendron in this season. Have people seen buffbard on rhododendron? Yes, buff also has white tail sides in flight. Yes. So this is a good way to tell buffbard because among these four, it's the most partial to nectar and the most partial to rhododendron. Now, this doesn't mean that no other warbler is going to feed on nectar. None of these, the other three ones with white tertial edges, but it is the most likely to. So what you see most on rhododendron and other nectar. But something else I'd like to point out here, if you notice that in this case and in the previous photos, crown stripes are not always visible. And these whitish tertial edges are sometimes more prominent than the crown stripe. So keep a lookout for that. In fact, the species that have more prominent crown stripes like Blythe's leaf warbler, gray-hooded and western crowned actually don't have white tertial edges. Or whitish tertial edges, I should say. It's not always clear white, but something to keep in mind that crown stripes may not always be very prominent, but you can see that the tertial edges are prominent and the wing bars are prominent enough. So next one, which is this other warbler that loves nectar. You can see that on its face, the forehead is reddish because it has dipped its face inside nectar. And this is a warbler that absolutely loves nectar. So can you use the rules over here and guess? Because of course you cannot fully guess from these rules here, but you can bring it down to a few. Can you guess what this warbler is? Okay, many guesses are coming. Does it have a wing bar or not? No wing bar. Does it have a crown stripe or not? No crown stripe. Does it have whitish tertial edges? No, because only those that have crown stripes have tertial edges. Even if the crown stripe is not visible, this doesn't have a wing bar. So, right, so we are down to the first list. Tickled, sulphur-bellied, titlers, grey-hooded. Grey-hooded is ruled out because it has a crown stripe and it is yellow, quite yellow. This one doesn't have yellow. Chiffchaff, dusky warbler, smoky warbler, and greenish warbler. Greenish warbler can sometimes not show a wing bar, or it can be one off. Does anybody think this could be a greenish warbler? Fine. There's a yes and there's a no. Fine. Not sulfur belly, not a smoky, not a dusky. Okay. That is correct. It is none of those. I'm not going to cover smoky and dusky here because they are quite rare um, in the Himalaya. But this one is a warbler that loves nectar. Remember that is how we reached this warbler. And this is perhaps the most nectarivorous warbler that occurs in the subcontinent, at least in my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody. But this is a titler's leaf warbler. And titlers is largely restricted to the Western Himalaya, going a bit into Nepal, but doesn't occur in eastern parts like Bhutan and beyond, or is uncommon. So this is a titler's leaf warbler. Titler's doesn't have a wing bar. It also doesn't have any yellow like tickles and sulphur-bellied. And unlike chiffchaff, it has a very prominent eye stripe and a supercilium. So I will not be getting into chiffchaff in this particular in this presentation. can look at it before, but titlers is a much more contrasting bird than a common 𝗃𝗃𝗃. And loves nectar. So that is a really important thing to keep in mind, because especially when it comes to the Himalaya, it comes in spring passage, and it tends to feed a lot on nectar because a lot of plants are flowering. You'll also see it with this pollen often. I'll just take a second to look at all the comments that have come in. Yeah, so even in Sikkim, titlers typically doesn't occur. It can be a rarity. Yeah, so we zero down not to titlers and ticklers, but titlers and common 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. Right. So no titlers in the part of Nepal where Yubin lives. Huh. Ticklers has yellow. Ticklers is a yellowish bird. So it's like a bit like sulphur-bellied. It has yellow supercilium, typically yellow below. We'll get to tickles later. But tickles can be ruled out just from the lack of yellow. This kind of bird, this kind of plain appearance, little bit of green on the wings, and lacking a wing bar, lacking a crown stripe, lacking white tertial edges, typically will get us down to titlers and common 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. Again, I'm not including dusky and smoky. Dusky and smoky can look similar, but they're much more brownish. But we'll keep them aside for now. That can we can deal with those separately when the need arises. But remember the nectar preferences. That's an important thing to keep in mind here. And this, oh, sorry. Here we have the distribution of titlers. And you can see that there are some scattered records in the east, some scattered records in the peninsula. But you can see that it largely is a passage migrant through Uttarakhand, Himachal, and those areas. And it breeds the orange color in summer. It breeds in a small part of Kashmir and beyond. You can see that it winters in the hills of southern India. So titler is a very interesting species. It's also near endemic to the region and of relevance for endemic bird day. But yeah, has a greenish tinge compared to 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 can also show a little bit of green, and titler sometimes can lack that greenish tinge. But it is a much darker bird than a 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. It's much 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 is typically a very pale bird and doesn't have such a prominent supercilium and eye stripe. Yeah, tickles has yellow, so that's a very easy way to get to tickles. Right. So the next one, identify this warbler. It might be the same as one of the ones previously also. Use the rules, identify this warbler. Hmm? Okay. More guesses, more guesses. Can someone explain the reasons also? And can somebody tell me what is the difference? Why is this not the same as the previous bird? Why is this not titlers? I see that nobody is guessing titlers. Can somebody also mention why it's not titlers? Okay. Greenish slash chiff-chaff. No wing bars, no crown stripe, no white tertial edges. That's right. Not as greenish as titlers. Interesting comment. Okay, so it mostly split between chiff-chaff and greenish. Again, I'm not showing chiff-chaff here, but chiff-chaff we can rule out because chiff-chaff has a dark bill and it doesn't have such a contrasting dark eye stripe It's a much plainer, duller bird. So we can keep chiffchaff aside. But among the others, this is an interesting example because this is often how we see this bird. So you can see that there is no wing bar visible, there is no crown stripe, there are no white tertial edges. So we come to the first set of birds. But see, note that in the first set of birds, we also have the possibility of greenish sometimes, not showing a wing bar. And in peak winter, this is often the case, where greenish is completely worn out. That one wing bar that it has, the greenish, the migratory greenish that comes from Europe. The greenish that breeds in the Himalayas often has more prominent wing bars and has two wing bars. But the one that we see a lot of, even migrating through the Himalaya, is greenish that looks like this. And note the shorter blunt bill compared to titlers. So there is often confusion between greenish and titlers, and both tend to pass through the Himalaya around the same time. But the bill shape is completely different, as somebody said in comments. That is by far the best way to tell the two apart when you're looking at them, aside from behavior. The nectrivorous behavior of titlers, greenish doesn't often show. But you can also see certain other things. Yeah, like look at the sharp pointed bill that Titlers has, Titlers on the left, and you can and note the slightly blunter, shorter bill that Greenish has here. That clear to everybody? Titlers also has a longer supercilium, but that is not always obvious. But the bill shape, if you concentrate, if you see the bird, you see that it doesn't have a wing bar. You see that it's a reasonably dark bird. It's not pale like a chiffchaff. Take a look at chiffchaff separately. Chiffchaff is a pale bird. If it's not pale like a chiffchaff, immediately concentrate on the bill. And it doesn't have any yellow. Concentrate on the bill. And you'll see that if it has a nice pointed long bill, it's titlers. If it has a blunt bill, it's greenish. Also, titlers is not there in the Himalaya during winter. Greenish does occur in the foothills and nearby areas, even in winter. Okay, next one. Identify this warbler. Again, through all the features that are visible. Okay, somebody said gray-hooded. Somebody else has said gray-hooded. Take a look at all the features on the side, written on the side. Does it have wing bars or not? Does it have a crown stripe or not? Does it have white tertial edges or not? So Tickel's leaf has a yellowish body. A yellowish bill is not a feature to look at. Take a look at the bill color is something I haven't focused on here at all because there can be a lot of variation. Even titlers typically has a dark bill. Large bill typically has a dark bill, but there can be variation. And bill color can be a little confusing. So for now, I haven't mentioned bill color, but there will be some notes on bill color later on. So crown stripe, gray hooded, western crown. So to start off, this has wing bars. The wing bars are very, very worn out, very faint, but this has wing bars. This in fact has two wing bars. You can see one here and one more here. So two wing bars, but it has wing bars. So we're down to the wing bar present group. So gray hooded is ruled out. Chiffchaff is ruled out. Titlers is ruled out. Now we have a crown stripe. So we're down to the middle six. It doesn't have any sign of whitish tertial edges. So we're down to Blythe's leaf and western crown. So this is western crowned warbler. Yeah, Blythe's leaf or western crown. Large build is ruled out here because it has a crown stripe. It has a clear crown stripe, and large build does not have a crown stripe. Greenish also doesn't have a crown stripe. Otherwise, it could be either of those. But the presence of a crown stripe immediately rules out those two. The absence of the whitish tertial edges rules out Hume's, lemon drum, buff barred, and ashy throated. It's clear to everyone. So this is a western crowned warbler. But how can Western crowned and blight leaf be told apart? Except for some parts of Kashmir, blight leaf occurs throughout the Himalaya. It occurs in Nepal, Bhutan, it occurs in the Indian Himalaya, it occurs all the way into Arunachal Pradesh and beyond. And both of them co-occur in a large part of the Himalaya, but Western crown doesn't occur in the eastern parts. It occurs till somewhere in Nepal, but not further east of that. So range can be quite useful. If you see it in the eastern Himalaya, a bird like this that doesn't have whitish tertial edges, that has wing bars, has a crown stripe, and has a pretty prominent pale bill. So the first time I'm mentioning a bill, this prominent pale bill is quite distinctive for these two species. The others are typically more compact warblers with thinner, darker bills, the ones in this group that have crown stripes and wing bars. Uh, Western crown is in the Western Himalaya. Blight leaf is everywhere except the Kashmir Himalaya. And the best way to tell them apart is by song. But there is another way, at least in some part of the year. So again, apologies for sharing these maps that don't have distribution in Nepal and Bhutan. But I should get hold of maps for the entire region. But it shows what I'm looking to demonstrate over here, that blight leaf, if you look at it, you look at the purple squares in the Himalaya, you'll see that it throughout the year, it is largely in the Himalayas, and it winters a little bit down into the northeast plains, into West Bengal and those areas, but it occurs throughout the year in the Himalaya. And I imagine that is the case in Nepal and Bhutan as well. There's some altitudinal movement, but it is there year round. Whereas Western crown comes down to the peninsula in winter. You can see from the map that it's down in the south, in many hilly regions, forested regions in the winter, and in the summer, I mean, it passes through the entire subcontinent and spends the summer in the Western Himalaya, coming into I would imagine at least central Nepal. Am I right? Yeah. So check. You can check the maps on eBird to confirm, to see where they come in the Nepal Himalaya. Yeah, Western crown and blight leaf can be extremely similar. So to be careful and try and listen to song. But if you see it in winter, just by the seasonal distribution, you can be confident that it is blight leaf. If you see it now, it can be extremely difficult. But the good part is they'll be singing. Listen to their songs on Merlin or on eBird, and you'll get a sense for the difference in their songs. Western crown tends to have a much faster song. And I'm not getting into differences in plumage because they can be very subjective. How dark they are, how long the bill appears, all of this can be very subjective. But the song is objective. Listen to it singing, record the song, share it on groups that you're part of, and immediately people will identify it and you'll get a sense for how to tell them apart based on the song. And once you start distinguishing them based on song, every other way of telling them apart will become clearer. You'll get your own sense of differences in plumage. But for now, these are the two warblers with prominent crown stripes that do not have whitish tertial edges. So that would immediately lead you to this group. Any major questions so far? There's not much to go. I wanted to keep some time for discussion. Any big questions? Humes and Mandalis. Okay, so Mandali is the eastern subspecies of Hume's warbler. It is extremely uncommon in the Himalaya, anywhere across the Himalaya. So I would say that if you are a birder in the Himalaya, you can focus on Western Hume's warbler, and for now, record calls and then share them. And then calls are the only way at the moment to tell apart the Eastern Humes, which is Mandali's the warbler, and Western Humes. Personally, I've only come across Mandalis in Meghalaya in the winter. But anyway, yeah, we'll mostly stick to the commoner ones. Okay, so if there are no questions here, I'll move on to the last group. Identify this wobbler. So this is a wobbler that is particularly relevant to the westernmost, to the Trans-Himalayan regions, uh, but also to many other parts of the Himalayas where it passes through, and is also present in some parts of in summer and some parts of winter. Um, so this wobbler guesses use the features that are mentioned. Okay, I see that people are a bit divided between tickle's leaf and sulfur belly. Okay. Can people mention reasons as well? Okay, somebody has said greenish. Greenish is immediately ruled out from the yellow color. So it cannot be greenish wobbler. The only two wobblers that don't have wing bars, that don't have crown stripe, remember that if it has a crown stripe, gray-hooded becomes an option. If it doesn't have a crown stripe and it is yellow color, we are down to just these two species, tickle's leaf and sulfur-bellied. Between these two, I know it's a challenge all across the subcontinent, separating these two. Right, sulfur-bellied is more brownish. Somebody is guessing sulfur-bellied. More contrasting upper and undersides points to tickle's leaf. Okay, more yellow. Huh. Okay. Looks more greenish in color, but not the yellow color. The yellow color takes us to these two species. Yellow on the cheek for tickles versus a brown face for sulfur-bellied. Okay. So on that note, I'll go to the next one. And that is indeed tickle's leaf. And somebody mentioned one of the best features to tell it apart, but I'll put it in different words. So the comment was that tickle's leaf has a yellow cheek, sulfur bellied has a brownish cheek. But I'll flip this around and say that don't focus on the cheek, but instead focus on the prominence of the eye stripe. So you have the yellow supercilium and you have the dark eye stripe. So in sulfur bellied, it rarely appears that the bird has an eye stripe at all. You see a supercilium, but you will not see this contrasting eye stripe. And that's a good way because sometimes you can be confused. Is the cheek looking yellow? Is the cheek looking brown? But look for the presence of a contrasting eye stripe. And you'll, this is, in my opinion, the best way to tell the two apart. There are other ways as well. Even the colors of the, I mean, the tone of the yellow, the way that they feed, there are differences in behavior. Sulfur belly tends to feed a lot on the ground, tends to forage on the ground, but tickle's leaf can also do that. So that in itself is not enough. Sulfur bellied also tends to creep around tree trunks sometimes. But tickle's leaf can also show some slight behavior along those lines. So I would say keep an eye out for this behavior, which is certainly indicative of sulfur-bellied. But the best way to tell them apart is look at the contrast in the face, see whether the eye stripe is contrasting, and see whether the cheek is yellow or brown. But the two go together. And this is the right side, you have tickle's leaf warbler. The left side, you have sulfur-bellied warbler. Both of these birds usually come to the Himalaya in passage and in summer. Although there are parts of the eastern Himalaya where tickle's leaf also winters. Right. So I leave it here. There are a couple of them that I didn't cover, like Dusky and Smoky, because Dusky and Smoky, I'll mention a few words. They're much darker warblers. They winter mostly in lower elevations and in the plains, not very common in the Himalaya. If you see a warbler that doesn't fit any of the warblers that we spoke of, or something that is somewhat nondescript, brown, feeding near the ground, has again a prominent eye stripe supercilium. You can think about dusky and smoky warbler. Dusky and smoky warbler again have very distinctive calls. So that can also help you identify them. But I would say that if you come across a warbler that appears different from any of the ones we spoke about, record its call, take photos, immediately post it on the birding groups that you're part of, and you might actually have a dusky or a smoky warbler, which are really interesting finds. And I think they're smoky warbler and dusky are likely to be passing through the Himalaya even now. Passage is still on, and I think but somebody recently shared a video or a photo of a of a smoky warbler from Nepal, probably in passage. Smoky also breeds in the higher elevations of the Himalaya. So keep an eye out for it, both the call and song and birds that don't fit this profile. Common chiffchaff and mountain chiffchaff. These are two others that haven't been discussed over here. But again, you see that these two don't fit the profile of any of the birds we spoke about. So I'll leave it for now and take some questions. And next one, we'll get into details of more difficult wobblers, including the browner wobblers, and hopefully bush wobblers and other similar confusing birds in the Himalaya, but also flycatchers. And I've more or less, I feel that we can leave minivets out at the moment, although initially I thought that minivets should also be covered. But we'll go on to more wobblers and flycatchers in subsequent one. So yeah.
Thank you, Ashwin. We have 5 minutes and we can take some questions. So please put it in the chat box and we will ask Ashwin to answer them. I'll also keep an eye on the YouTube if there are any questions.
Thanks everyone for the kind words. Yeah. I hope everybody becomes more fond of leaf wobblers after this. So they are called leaf wobblers. I don't know the answer for sure. But I always assume that they're called leaf wobblers because they're mostly up in the canopy, unlike some of the other wobblers that are there in bushes. So you're up in the tree. So actually, they could have called them tree wobblers. But there are some other wobblers in Europe and Central Asia that also have the name tree wobbler, different genus. But generally, Philoscopus, slightly greenish in color. They're up in the canopy. I think that's why they've got the name leaf wobbler. But do correct me if I'm mistaken. No leaf wobbler is resident in the breeds in southern India. So they're largely birds that are there in the Himalaya and beyond. Many of them winter in the south, but none of them breed in southern India. Brownish flank bush warbler, I wish I could have covered that as well. Brownish flank bush warbler is a very nondescript, extremely common Himalayan warbler found all across the Himalayan region. This time of the year, the song is so distinctive and so beautiful that I think that is the best way to pick them out. They have a very nice song, so you can listen to it in Merlin and get a sense for it. Typically stays low, as do many bush warblers.
Ashwin, meanwhile, would you like to tell what needs to be done for birders participating for Himalayan bird count and endemic bird count?
This is a wonderful time, at least I feel, to be birding in the Himalaya. Go out and look at all the birds that are around you, and I think the really nice thing is they're everywhere. You don't have to really go too far to get nice birds. One suggestion I have is that listen to the song as much as possible and record songs as much as possible and share it on all of your birding groups because this is really a time for song in the Himalaya. And we'll see how that can be that can become more and more a part of everybody's birding experience, which I'm sure it already is for most people. And yes, certainly we'll continue the wobbler series going forward. Bush wobblers, hopefully next.
Ashwin, people are asking, could you please provide us with a tabular form of the 3 pointers? It would greatly assist us.
Yes, I'll do that. And I'll also share the presentation along.
So we will put the presentation on the Himalayan Bird Count event page. And we will also copy the links, the relevant links in the YouTube, Bird Count India YouTube channel.
Sir, can you answer my question?
Yes, tell me. What was your question?
That a wobbler has more than 2 or 3 features?
Yes, they have a lot of features. We only discussed 3 features, but as you look at them more and more, you'll notice that there are many small features for you to look at. You can look at the color of their beak. You can look at the color of their upper mandible, as it's called for the beak, the upper part. You can look at the color of the lower part. You can look at the color of the upper parts, of the underparts, of the legs. There are many of these features actually follow certain patterns. And as you watch these leaf warblers more and more, you'll start being able to use many of these features in identification and make it more and more specific, your understanding of these warblers. So yes, there are multiple features, even much more than what I discussed.
And sir, wobblers are only found in Himalayas?
No, there are warblers in the all across the subcontinent as well, especially in winter. But it is a very special group in the Himalaya because there are so many warblers in the Himalaya. You see that I mentioned so many here, and there are some that I didn't mention despite this. So that's why I think leaf warblers are a very important group. And if you go to all other kinds of warblers, bush warblers, and any other warbler, yeah, mainly bush warblers. There are so many more warblers in the Himalaya. So it's a very special group for the Himalaya.
It was nice session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin. And thanks everybody for staying on this webinar. We'll take a leave now and we'll soon be back with another session. Meanwhile, if you have any more questions, please continue adding them to our YouTube live. And we will try to get Ashwin to answer them in the next few days. So thanks everyone. Good night. Happy endemic birthday. Happy Himalayan bird count and happy birding.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ashwin.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.